Steve Miller, the man behind timeless hits like The Joker, Fly Like an Eagle, and Take the Money and Run. A musician whose voice and guitar riffs helped define the sound of the 70s and 80s. To the world, Steve was a cool, easygoing rocker who always seemed laid back and mellow. But behind that chill exterior, insiders claim there was another side, one filled with frustration, resentment, and a sharp tongue that few dared to cross. Because while Steve Miller may have sung about space and love, offstage, he reportedly had little patience for what he saw as phonies in the music industry. And over the years, he didn't just dislike a few people, he flat out hated them. From arrogant rock stars to manipulative record executives, and even fellow musicians who rubbed them the wrong way, Steve never hesitated to speak his mind. Today on Legend Uncovered, we're diving deep into the 5 artists that Steve Miller is said to have secretly despised the most. Rivalries filled with bitterness, broken trust, and a whole lot of rock and roll ego. Some of these stories might shock you because they reveal a side of Steve Miller the public rarely saw. Let's uncover the truth.
5. Paul McCartney. At number 5, we start big with Paul McCartney. Now, Steve Miller has never been one to shy away from speaking his mind about anyone, not even a Beatle. Though Miller respected the Beatles for their impact on music, sources claim he had personal frustrations with Paul, especially after working with him in the late 1970s. You see, during recording sessions and interviews, Steve reportedly felt that McCartney carried himself like music royalty, expecting everyone to bow down to him. Insiders say Steve found Paul's perfectionism exhausting, and he allegedly described him as brilliant but bossy. Things reportedly got tense when Steve criticized the way certain collaborations were being handled, accusing McCartney of caring more about his image than the music itself. While the two never had a public falling out, Miller's private comments over the years painted a picture of irritation and disappointment. He supposedly once told a friend, "I don't need a Beatle telling me how to play the blues." That line alone tells you how deep the resentment ran.
Number 4. Bob Dylan. Coming in at number 4, Bob Dylan. Now, you might think every classic rock artist admired Dylan for his poetry and cultural influence, but Steve Miller? Not exactly. According to multiple sources, Steve didn't buy into the Dylan myth. He respected the man's songwriting, sure, but not his attitude. In fact, Steve reportedly found Dylan arrogant and distant. During certain encounters in the 1970s, Miller allegedly grew frustrated with what he called Dylan's holier-than-thou behavior toward other musicians. In interviews years later, Steve hinted that he didn't appreciate how Dylan's fans and critics treated him like some kind of musical prophet. He's just a guy with a guitar. A talented one, but still, just a guy. This blunt honesty rubbed some people the wrong way. But it was pure Steve Miller, straightforward and unfiltered. 3. The Rolling Stones. At number 3, we have the Rolling Stones. Yes, the legendary rock band themselves. While many artists dreamed of sharing the stage with Mick Jagger and Keith Richards, Steve Miller reportedly wanted nothing to do with them. Why? Because according to him, the Stones were all show and no soul. The real tension began back in the late 1960s when both acts crossed paths on the festival circuit. Steve allegedly felt that the Stones treated American blues, the very foundation of his own music, as a fashion statement rather than a passion. He reportedly told fellow musicians that the Stones stole from blues legends without giving proper credit, and that their attitude toward other performers was arrogant and cold. One insider even claimed that Steve called Jagger a cartoon version of a bluesman. The feud never went public, but those close to Steve say he carried that disdain for decades. For him, the Stones were masters of style, but not of authenticity. Number 2. The Steve Miller Band's own peers, the corporate rock scene. Now this one is fascinating. At number 2, Steve's frustration wasn't directed at one single band, but an entire generation of acts that critics labeled corporate rock. By the late 70s and early 80s, radio was dominated by slickly produced arena bands like Journey, Foreigner, and Boston, and Steve Miller absolutely hated that sound. He reportedly called it soulless, saying those groups cared more about production and image than storytelling or feel. Miller prided himself on authenticity. Every note, every lyric had to mean something. So when these glossy, radio-friendly acts began to take over, it infuriated him. In one interview, he allegedly remarked, "Rock stopped being dangerous when everyone started chasing hits." To him, the new wave of commercial rock represented everything wrong with the industry: safe, polished, and completely disconnected from the roots of the blues. That attitude earned him some enemies in the business, but Steve didn't care. He was never one to bite his tongue just to stay friendly. Number 1. The music industry executives. And finally, at number 1, the group Steve Miller truly hated the most wasn't even a band. It was the music industry itself. Steve's hatred for record executives, label heads, and industry insiders is legendary. In fact, his outburst at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction in 2016 is still talked about today. Instead of giving a polite thank you speech, Steve unleashed years of pent-up anger about how artists were treated. He blasted the hall for its corporate politics, accused record labels of cheating musicians out of royalties, and called the business a bunch of snakes in suits. The audience didn't know whether to applaud or gasp, but it was pure Steve Miller, finally saying out loud what many artists only whispered about. That night, Steve made it clear that he never played by the industry's rules and never would. He believed music should be about truth and creativity, not contracts and profits. For Miller, the biggest villains weren't his fellow artists. They were the people behind the scenes pulling the strings.
Please don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon.